The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Sarah Martinez stepped out of her rental car. She had driven 3 hours from the city to reach this remote training facility, her orders tucked safely in her briefcase. At 28, she was younger than most officers of her rank, something that had earned her both respect and skepticism throughout her career. The base entrance loomed ahead, with its imposing gates and uniformed guards. Sarah adjusted her civilian clothes and walked confidently toward the checkpoint. She had chosen to dress down for the journey, wearing simple jeans and a navy blazer, wanting to observe the facility's operations without the immediate recognition that her uniform would bring. As she approached the main gate, a burly sergeant stepped forward, his hand raised in a stopping gesture. "Ma'am, this is a restricted military facility. I'm going to need to see some identification and know your business here." Sarah smiled politely and reached into her purse for her military ID. "Of course, Sergeant. I'm here for the joint training exercise." But before she could produce her credentials, another voice cut through the morning air. "Hold on there, Sergeant Williams." A tall man in a crisp uniform strode over, his chest decorated with ribbons and his expression stern. This was Colonel James Harrison, the base's second-in-command, though Sarah didn't know that yet. Colonel Harrison looked Sarah up and down with obvious disapproval. "Miss, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't a tourist attraction. We have serious military operations happening here, and we can't have civilians wandering around pretending they belong." Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. "I assure you, Colonel, I'm not a tourist. If you'll allow me to show you my identification—" "Save it," Harrison interrupted, his voice growing louder. "Do you have any idea how many people try to sneak onto military bases every year? Young women especially, thinking they can charm their way past security with some sob story about being lost or having official business." A small crowd had begun to gather. Several junior officers and enlisted personnel had paused in their duties to watch the confrontation unfold. Sarah remained calm, her military training keeping her composure steady despite the growing embarrassment of the situation. "Colonel Harrison," she said, having read his name tag, "I understand your concern for security, but I really do need to speak with the base commander about today's exercise." Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The base commander? Lady, you can't just walk up to a military installation and demand to see the commanding officer. That's not how this works. Sergeant Williams, please escort this young woman off the premises." Sergeant Williams looked uncomfortable. He had been reaching for Sarah's ID when the colonel had interrupted, and something about her calm demeanor and the way she carried herself suggested she might actually belong here. But orders were orders. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Williams said reluctantly. "If you have legitimate business here, you'll need to go through proper channels." Sarah sighed, realizing that this was escalating beyond reason. "Gentlemen, I really think there's been a misunderstanding. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm here on official orders. I have my military ID right here, and I can explain everything if you'll just—" "Enough." Colonel Harrison's face was reddening now. "Security. We have a situation at the main gate. We need this woman removed from the premises immediately." 2 military police officers jogged over, their hands resting casually on their weapons. The situation was becoming increasingly tense, and Sarah knew she had to defuse it quickly before it got completely out of hand. "Officers," she said calmly, "before this goes any further, I need you to call your base commander. Tell him that Major Sarah Martinez has arrived for the joint training exercise, and that there seems to be some confusion at the front gate." Colonel Harrison scoffed. "Major? You've got to be kidding me. Look at her. She's dressed like a college student. She can't be a day over 25, and she's certainly not a major in the United States Army." One of the MP officers, Corporal Davis, shifted uncomfortably. Unlike his colleagues, he had served at several different bases and had learned that assumptions could be dangerous. "Sir, maybe we should verify her identity before—" "Corporal," I said, "escort her off the premises," Harrison snapped. "I don't want to hear another word about this nonsense." Sarah looked around at the gathered crowd. which had grown to include about 20 service members. Some looked sympathetic, others confused, and a few seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. She made a decision. "Very well," she said, her voice carrying a new edge of authority that made several people straighten unconsciously. "Since you insist on making this difficult, I'll call the base commander myself." She pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number from memory. Colonel Harrison rolled his eyes and muttered something about dramatic civilians, while the crowd watched in silence. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "General Morrison. General, this is Major Martinez. I'm at the front gate of your facility, and I'm afraid there's been a rather significant misunderstanding. It seems your second in command is under the impression that I'm a civilian trying to infiltrate the base." There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by what sounded suspiciously like suppressed laughter. "And what exactly has Colonel Harrison done?" "He's ordered my removal from the premises, sir, despite my attempts to show him my credentials and explain my purpose here." "I see. And how long has this been going on?" Sarah glanced at her watch. "About 15 minutes, sir. I was hoping to begin the morning briefing on schedule, but it appears that won't be possible under the current circumstances." Colonel Harrison had gone very pale as he began to piece together what was happening. The tone of Sarah's voice, her casual familiarity with military protocol, and the way she had addressed whoever was on the phone were all beginning to paint a very different picture than what he had assumed. "Major Martinez," General Morrison's voice was carefully controlled. "Please put Colonel Harrison on the phone." Sarah held out her phone to the colonel, whose face had now cycled from red to white and was settling on a sickly green color. "Colonel, the base commander would like to speak with you." Colonel Harrison took the phone with trembling hands, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. "General Morrison, sir." "I can explain. Can you, Colonel? Because from what I understand, you've just attempted to have my operation commander removed from her own training exercise. Is that correct?" Number 1. The blood drained completely from Harrison's face. "Operation commander?" "Colonel Harrison, are you telling me that you determined someone's military status based on their clothing choice during off-duty travel, and that you refused to examine their credentials before making that determination?" The gathered crowd had grown larger, and word was spreading quickly through the base. Whispers rippled through the assembled service members as they began to understand what was unfolding before them. Sergeant Williams stepped back, clearly wanting to distance himself from the situation. "Sir, I was just trying to maintain base security," Harrison stammered into the phone. "We've had incidents before with people trying to—" "Colonel, let me be very clear about something. Major Martinez is not only a decorated officer with 2 tours in Afghanistan, she's also the youngest person ever promoted to head a joint training operation. She's here because the Pentagon specifically requested her to oversee this exercise. Are you beginning to understand the magnitude of your error?" Sarah watched as Colonel Harrison's face went through several more color changes. She felt a mixture of professional annoyance and personal embarrassment. This kind of situation was exactly why she had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts throughout her career, only to find herself constantly having to prove her worth based on appearance and age. Furthermore, General Morrison's voice continued, clearly audible to those standing nearby, "Major Martinez is here to evaluate our base's readiness for joint operations with Allied forces. Part of that evaluation includes assessing how our personnel handle unexpected situations and treat visiting officers. How do you think this reflects on our unit, Colonel?" Harrison looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. "Sir, if I had known, if you had known?" "Colonel, the proper protocol when someone claims to be military personnel is to verify their credentials, not to make assumptions based on their appearance. This is basic military procedure that you've apparently forgotten." Sarah could see that some of the younger officers in the crowd were taking notes, both literally and mentally. This would become a teaching moment about assumptions, protocol, and respect that would likely be discussed in leadership classes for years to come. General Morrison's voice softened slightly, though the authority remained. "Colonel Harrison, I want you to formally apologize to Major Martinez. And then I want you in my office in 30 minutes for what I suspect will be a very long conversation about proper military procedure. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Harrison handed the phone back to Sarah with shaking hands. She accepted it gracefully and concluded her conversation with the general, confirming the schedule for the day's briefings and exercises. When she hung up, an awkward silence fell over the group. Colonel Harrison cleared his throat and stepped forward, his posture now rigidly formal. Major Martinez, I owe you a sincere apology. I made assumptions that were inappropriate and failed to follow proper protocol. There is no excuse for my behavior, and I take full responsibility for this incident. Sarah nodded acknowledgement. Apology accepted, Colonel. However, I hope this serves as a reminder that military bearing and competence aren't determined by age, gender, or civilian attire. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, ma'am. Sergeant Williams, who had been standing frozen throughout the exchange, finally found his voice. Major Martinez. Ma'am, if I could see your credentials now, I'd like to properly process you through the gate. Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving. Of course, Sergeant. Thank you for your professionalism. As she handed over her military ID and orders, the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered to catch glimpses of the woman who had just humbled their second-in-command. The whispers were already beginning to spread stories that would grow in the telling. Corporal Davis, who had tried to suggest verifying Sarah's identity earlier, stepped forward. Ma'am, welcome to the base. Is there anything we can do to make up for this situation? Thank you, Corporal. I appreciate that. Actually, this incident has given me some valuable insight into how your base handles security challenges. It will be useful information for my report. Colonel Harrison, who was still standing nearby looking mortified, cleared his throat again. Major, if there's anything I can do to make this right. Sarah considered for a moment. Actually, Colonel, there is something. I'd like you to use this as a case study in your next leadership meeting. Discuss with your officers the importance of proper protocol, the dangers of making assumptions, and the value of treating every person with respect until proven otherwise. Yes, ma'am. That's an excellent idea. As Sergeant Williams finished processing her credentials and handed them back, Sarah noticed something interesting. Several of the female personnel on base had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the proceedings with obvious interest. She realized that her handling of this situation might have a broader impact than just embarrassing one colonel. A young female lieutenant approached and saluted. Major Martinez, ma'am. Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh. I just wanted to say, well, thank you for handling that the way you did. Some of us have faced similar situations, though perhaps not quite so dramatically. Sarah returned the salute. Lieutenant, part of our job as officers is to pave the way for those who come after us. Sometimes that means standing our ground when others might back down. Ma'am, will you be conducting any leadership seminars while you're here? I think a lot of us would benefit from hearing about your experiences. That's not part of my official schedule, but I think that's an excellent idea. Let's see what we can arrange. Round. 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 Let's see what we can arrange. Colonel Harrison, overhearing this exchange, saw an opportunity to begin making amends. Major, I would be honored to help facilitate any additional training you'd like to provide. It's clear that our personnel could benefit from your perspective. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Very well, Colonel. Let's plan something for this evening. After the day's exercises are complete, I think we can turn this morning's incident into a valuable learning experience for everyone. As they walked through the gate and onto the base proper, Sarah couldn't help but notice how differently the personnel were treating her now. Word had spread quickly, and she could see the mixture of curiosity, respect, and embarrassment on faces throughout the facility. The irony wasn't lost on her that Colonel Harrison's attempt to block her entry had actually created an opportunity to address some of the underlying issues that female officers faced throughout the military. Sometimes the most powerful lessons came from the most unexpected moments. The day's training exercises proceeded with remarkable efficiency under Sarah's command. Her reputation had preceded her arrival, but the morning's incident had given the entire base a first-hand demonstration of her grace under pressure. Officers and enlisted personnel alike found themselves paying closer attention to her leadership style, noting how she combined firm authority with genuine respect for every person under her command. During the joint tactical exercise, Sarah demonstrated why the Pentagon had chosen her for this assignment. She coordinated seamlessly between different units, identified weaknesses in communication protocols, and provided real-time solutions that improved the overall effectiveness of the operation. Even Colonel Harrison, who had spent most of the day looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, had to admit that her strategic insights were impressive. As the afternoon briefing concluded, Sarah addressed the assembled officers. "Ladies and gentlemen, today's exercises have shown both strengths and areas for improvement in your unit's readiness. Overall, I'm impressed with the professionalism and adaptability I've witnessed." She paused, looking around the room at the faces watching her intently. "However, I want to address something that happened this morning, because it highlights an issue that affects military effectiveness beyond just this base." Colonel Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Sarah's tone remained professional and instructive rather than punitive. "When we make assumptions about people's capabilities based on appearance, age, gender, or any other factor besides their demonstrated performance, we weaken our entire organization. In combat situations, these assumptions can cost lives. In peacetime, they cost us talent and effectiveness." Lieutenant Walsh, who had spoken to Sarah earlier, found herself nodding along with several other female officers. This was a conversation many of them had hoped to have but hadn't known how to initiate. "I want to share something with you," Sarah continued. "When I was first commissioned, I had a commanding officer who told me I'd never make it past captain because I was too young and too pretty to be taken seriously. That same officer later served under my command in Afghanistan, where my youthful appearance proved useful in gaining the trust of local women who provided crucial intelligence." The room was completely silent now, with everyone hanging on her words. The point is not that his assessment was wrong, though it was. The point is that his assumptions limited his ability to effectively utilize the resources under his command. When leaders make decisions based on preconceptions rather than facts, they make their units less effective. Sergeant Williams, who had been present for the morning's incident, raised his hand. "Ma'am, what should we have done differently this morning?" "Excellent question, Sergeant. The proper response would have been to politely ask for identification, while treating me with the same respect you would show any potential officer. When someone claims military status, verify it through proper channels rather than making judgments based on appearance." Sarah gestured toward Colonel Harrison. "The Colonel has agreed to use this morning's incident as a case study in leadership training, not to embarrass anyone, but to help all of us learn from the experience." Harrison straightened in his chair. "That's correct. Major Martinez has shown remarkable grace in turning my error into a teaching moment for our entire unit." After the formal briefing ended, Sarah held the impromptu leadership seminar she had promised. The conference room filled with officers and senior enlisted personnel, including a notably high number of female service members who rarely had opportunities to hear from someone who had navigated the challenges they faced daily. "Leadership isn't about commanding respect through intimidation or assumption," Sarah began. "It's about earning respect through competence, fairness, and the ability to see potential in others that they might not even see in themselves." She shared stories from her deployments, her struggles with being taken seriously as a young officer, and the strategies she had developed for turning challenges into opportunities. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions about everything from handling discrimination to building confidence in leadership roles. One young corporal asked, "Major, how do you deal with people who continue to doubt your abilities, even after you've proven yourself?" Sarah smiled. "You know, Corporal, I've learned that some people will never change their minds, no matter what you do. But for every person who refuses to see your capabilities, there are usually several others who are watching how you handle the situation. Your professionalism and competence in difficult moments teaches them what real leadership looks like. As the evening session wound down, General Morrison appeared in the doorway. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The room snapped to attention, but he gestured for everyone to remain seated. "I wanted to check on our guest speaker, Major Martinez. How was your first day at our facility?" "Oh, eventful, sir, but ultimately very productive. Your personnel have been professional and receptive to the training concepts we've discussed." General Morrison's eyes twinkled with amusement. "I heard it was quite eventful indeed. Colonel Harrison, I trust you found the day educational as well?" "Graham, I heard. Inkram. Crom. I heard. Inkram. I heard. Yes, sir. Very much so. Major Martinez has helped us identify some important areas for improvement in our protocols and leadership approach." "Everything. Major Martinez has reminded of the tasks. Outstanding. Major, I understand you'll be with us for the rest of the week?" "Yes, sir. Tomorrow, we'll be running the full joint operation simulation, and then I'll be conducting individual unit assessments through Friday." After General Morrison left, the informal gathering began to break up. Several officers approached Sarah individually to thank her for her insights and to ask for specific advice about their own leadership challenges. Lieutenant Walsh was among the last to leave. "Major Martinez, I just wanted to say that seeing how you handled this morning's situation has given me a lot to think about. I've been hesitant to assert myself in certain situations because I was worried about being seen as difficult or pushy. Lieutenant, there's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive, just as there's a difference between being respectful and being passive. Finding that balance is part of developing your leadership style. Don't let other people's discomfort with your competence limit your potential." "Thank you, ma'am. That really helps." As Sarah finally made her way to the guest quarters, she reflected on the unexpected turn the day had taken. What could have been a humiliating and frustrating experience had instead become an opportunity to address important issues and connect with service members who needed to hear that their challenges were understood and their potential recognized. Colonel Harrison appeared in the hallway as she reached her door. "Major Martinez, I wanted to apologize once more, privately. I realized that my actions this morning reflected poorly not just on me, but on the entire base. Colonel, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them, and how we use that knowledge to become better leaders. Your willingness to acknowledge the error and use it as a teaching opportunity shows the kind of leader you can be. Thank you for your grace in handling this situation. I've learned more about effective leadership in one day than I have in months." As Sarah settled into her quarters for the evening, she thought about the ripple effects of the morning's confrontation. Tomorrow's exercises would proceed more smoothly, partly because the base personnel now understood exactly who she was and what she brought to the table. But more importantly, the conversations that had grown out of the incident had opened doors for discussions about respect, assumption, and leadership that might not have happened otherwise. Sometimes the best teaching moments came from the most unexpected places. What had started as an attempt to block her entrance had become an opportunity to open minds and change perspectives. It was a reminder that every challenge contained the seeds of opportunity for those willing to cultivate them with patience, professionalism, and a commitment to turning obstacles into stepping stones. The mission she had come to complete was about more than just evaluating military readiness. It was about demonstrating that leadership transcended assumptions and that competence could emerge from the most unlikely encounters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she could rest knowing that she had turned a moment of conflict into a catalyst for positive change.